Good evening and welcome to Connect to Escape. My name's Kerry Sterling and tonight we're going to be discussing the concept of Jesus. Who is Jesus, or who was Jesus? Is he a man of our present, or is he just a man of the past? I suppose the answer to the question lies in which one you ask. Let's find out more tonight on Connect to Escape. Joining me this evening, we have some special guests. We have Andrew Leyland, who is the Director of English at Newbold College. We have John Olawa, who is a recruitment professional. We have Sophia Peart, who is a student of theology, and Patrick Johnson, who is currently studying for PhD at King's College. Today we're discussing the concept of Jesus, and to get us started, we went out to the British public and we asked them who Jesus was to them. Let's find out what they said.
What does Jesus or God mean to you?
That's a very personal question. What does God mean to me? You know, let's say I want to be personal on that. What I experienced with God was acceptance and love. It's something like a hug from somebody that you trust. It was not easy to get there, to experience that. But when I experienced that, that changed my life. That changed my life.
He gives me a reason to wake up each day. He gives me purpose in life. Yeah, he gives me a reason.
He influences my whole life. Everything I do, every breath I take, every moment I wake. It is that relationship that makes a difference to me that I want to share with other people, and I want to use all of my time, talents, and resources for.
Well, everything. It's hard to pinpoint something. It just, for me, it means stability and satisfaction.
What does Jesus or God mean to you?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
I can tell you that.
He is my life.
I was brought up, well, both brought up Christian.
Yeah.
But
I would say I'm agnostic. I believe there's something. I haven't discovered for myself what that is, but I'm a pretty open person. If I ever felt the hand of a divine being on me, I wouldn't be ignorant to it. I'd embrace it fully. But at this stage of my life, I'm not quite there at any particular religion.
He's changed my life. Yeah.
Do you think about God, or does God mean anything to you?
I don't really think about it, to be honest.
So there were quite a few different opinions and thoughts there. I think we went from one side of the spectrum to the other. Andrew, why might people think that Jesus is irrelevant?
I think you're right. The questions or the answers the people gave in the interviews there were very poles apart. Either Jesus meant absolutely everything to them. He'd changed their life, one person said. Another person said, he gives me stability. And then other people means absolutely nothing to them. I don't know why. It's a very personal thing what Jesus can mean, and I think it all comes down to Jesus is a person. He was a human, and it's about a relationship. And if we haven't engaged or been part of a relationship with Jesus, same with anybody. If we haven't begun a relationship, it can't have any meaning to us or any influence on us.
Yeah, I guess the challenge with the whole thing is relationship to somebody you can't see, you can't touch, not physical. the starting point there makes it really difficult, doesn't it? So I think that's an immediate reason why he becomes irrelevant, because for most of us, we're only concerned with what's right in front of us and what we can actually relate to here and now.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking of someone, nobody who exists now has seen Jesus or talked or physically touched him in the sense that we do with other people. So it is a very difficult concept to get our heads around. But I think if we don't consider it, then it's like any other person in the world. You were asked, how do you feel about this person or that person you've never met? You can have no feeling, no good or negative feeling, just as the gentleman said in the video, he means nothing. It's neither negative or positive, just there's no meaning to me because I haven't engaged in that thought or relationship.
I think the point of relationships is so huge in general when dealing with the concept of who is Jesus or what does God mean to you, because relationships become meaningful when you experience them, when you are interacting with them, and the individual that you're in a relationship with or the group of people, the meaning is in the experience almost. And it's like, just as you said, there's millions of people in this world, billions of people. If you pull one out and say, what do you feel about this person? Well, whether that person's real or not, if I don't know them, don't know their name, don't know what their characteristics are, I don't know how they respond to things, how they respond to what I say, I'm not going to have an opinion about them. Yeah. I'm not going to have thought about them. I'm not going to have considered what they feel about a certain situation or anything like that. So the relationship aspect and the engagement is, for me anyway, it's huge.
So maybe the first question in a sense is, why should I bother thinking about this person in the first place? Yeah. Because, as you say, there are billions of other people around the world that are now and have been. Why should I single out this one person to give him any headspace? Maybe that's the first question people often want to have answered.
And I think looking at the polar opposites from the responses on the street, you either have people who do believe and it means so much, and others who haven't given him a thought. But those bunch that have given him a thought, for one single person to mean so much, for one single person to have changed somebody's life, that's somebody that must have some relevance. You know, but like you said, they've had an experience. You know, somebody referred to, he's changed my whole life, and I'm sure that wasn't in an instant. I'm sure that was an experience. That was a process of getting to know who Jesus is, and that process of changing happening.
So I think that's for me is what singles out Christianity, which obviously Jesus is the centre, the focus of Christianity. What singles it out differently to other religions in that it's about a relationship with another person. I mean, ultimately, other religions are a relationship with God, but here it's kind of different. We can relate to Jesus, whether we believe he was real or not, historical or not. The fact was, he was a man who you know, walked on this earth and lived on this earth, and the centre point for me is that it is about relationship. And those people who are talking aren't talking about trying to prove their faith. They're just saying, you know, look, this is what this man Jesus did to me. He changed my life. He means everything. He sustains me. He gives me stability, etc. And I think that's what, for me, makes Christianity such a very different faith to other faiths.
That's really interesting, because I think it's an interesting point in that most other world religions aren't telling you to relate to their central prophet or anything like that, in a sense. They're telling you to relate to the teachings of their prophet, but not that prophet as a person.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying there is that Christianity actually bucks that trend and goes in a completely different direction.
So as you've seen so far, there's a lot that we're finding out about the concept of Jesus, and a lot of it has to do with relationship. But before we get to that, let's just take some time to have some special music by Kirsty Esselval Smars.
Precious Lord Jesus, how I adore you, Lord, unto you surrender I will. Thus I obey, I honor and serve you, though you were dying, loving me still. Thus I obey, I honor and serve you, though you were dying, loving me still. Grant me, dear Jesus, more of your being. Let your reflection shine on my face. Power to stand firm in all I implore you. Paint within me your image of grace. Power to stand firm in all I implore you. Paint within me your image of grace. My hands, my feet are yours for the using. My eyes, my ears as well, Lord on high. Freely my heart in service I offer. Precious Lord Jesus, yours am I. Freely my heart in service I offer. Precious Lord Jesus, yours, only yours am I.
What a beautiful piece of music that was. I thoroughly enjoyed it. We're now going to speak to John. John, tell us a little more about how Jesus showed his relevance in your life.
It's actually a really good question. It has to really start with my background. I am the second child of 4 boys, and my parents are great individuals when it comes to communicating. Growing up, we lived all over the United States because my father was a pastor, and we would travel, and we would have so many different experiences and different schools, homeschooled, public school, just different situations just because we moved so much. Growing up, I would always, you know, look up to my father because you have this man who is leading a group of people, you know, anywhere from 200 members to, you know, 700 members on a daily basis for the churches that he was a part of. And he would be there, you know, 9 to 5 every day of the week. Weekends, we would be there from anytime from 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 p.m. at night. And while he was leading this church family, as it were, he had his family. He had us, you know, there's 4 boys and a wife. And throughout my childhood, specifically around the age of, I want to say 7 or 8, I can remember just being in awe, just being like, who is this guy? Like, he's taking care of so many people, so many individuals with different personalities, different characters, different problems, and he somehow manages to have time for each and every one of them. He always had time for each and every one of them. But on top of that, he had time cut out for each one of us. There was never a time in my childhood that I can remember needing my father or wanting to talk to him, and him not putting everything he had aside to focus on my issue, to focus on my problems, from little ones to, you know, like, I don't want to do the dishes, and he'll explain why it was necessary to do the dishes, or big ones when I found myself, you know, in trouble older, you know, later on in life, and I'd be stuck somewhere, and 2 o'clock in the morning, my father would come drive and pick me up and take me home. So I can remember being about 7, and there was this big program going on in the community, and my father was speaking, and he was just talking about love, you know, grace and understanding, and I was like, wow, this guy, he's the bomb, as it were. He's a great guy. He's awesome. And there came a time when they said, you know, would you like to make a decision or something? And a day went by, and I went to my dad before the program was going to continue the following day, and I said, Dad, I want to be like you. Like, I want to be kind. I want to be loving. I want to have enough time for everybody all the time. You know, I want to be able to have, then I said I wanted 6 kids. But I said, I want to have, you know, all these kids, but be able to take care of them and take care of everyone around. I want to have enough money to be able to care for everybody that needs help. I want to be like you. I want to be like you. And I can just remember my dad just saying something along the lines of, it's not me. It's not me you want to be like. It's not me. I can't do any of this stuff on my own. None of the things that you see come from what I'm doing. And I was confused. I was stunned. And I think it was the following day my dad was speaking, and he brought up the story. He brought up that story of what just happened the day before with me, and he was saying that anything that he does, anything that he is, he owes it to Jesus. That's the person that he is trying to be like. And I was like, whoa, okay. So if my dad is amazing, my dad is awesome, my dad has all these great attributes, but he's trying to be like somebody else, I want to be like that person. And it was awesome. I raised my hand at the end of the program, and I went to the front, and my dad baptized me and explained to me what it was to be like Jesus. And that just really defined for me the earliest memory of who Jesus is, a kind person that is ready to listen and is available to communicate. So that's him.
Wow. So it's really interesting what you were saying about how, you know, you were looking at your father and you were relating to him. But I guess the question I'd like to ask is Jesus, a man who lived 2,000 years ago, is he someone that we can relate to today? I mean, Patrick, what's your thought on this?
You know, if you think about relating to somebody, relationships are all built on communication, both listening to and talking to, backwards and forwards, really. So if we to think about relating to the person of Jesus, it needs to be, okay, is communication possible? Because without that, you might as well forget it. And Christians tend to believe then that within the Bible is God speaking to us, is Jesus' words. And so the possibility for him to be speaking to us is right there. If we would take the time to read that, then yeah, Jesus actually does speak to us. The second part of that then is, can I speak to him? And well, according to Christians in the Bible, yes, you can speak to him through prayer. And so that dialogue is possible. A relationship then becomes possible with someone who lived 2,000 years ago, because we still have his words preserved for us. And the testimony of many Christians is that as they communicate with Jesus through prayer, sometimes there's that inner conviction, kind of idea, thought of words from him. And many Christians have felt, yeah, that is quite relevant for where I'm at right now. So I think most definitely we can relate to this being who lived 2,000 years ago, just based on those principles of communication that we use today to build relationships.
I guess if you think relationships today with people who are around you, who you can see, touch, feel, those relationships can often be very difficult. How do you then, it isn't a relationship with someone who you can't see and you can't touch and feel, how doesn't that diminish their relevance? Because isn't it harder? Doesn't it become harder?
For me, it takes me back to another story, real quick, of my pen pal. When I was younger, there was a time when writing letters to somebody in a foreign country that you'd never seen before was huge. And I remember I had a pen pal, interestingly enough, in London, and I was living in America. And to this day, I've never met him, never seen him. I don't know anything really about him except for what was in those letters. But I can remember being excited every time I would receive a letter from him and every time that I got to write, you know. And it was because I felt like I could tell this person anything about me, everything about me, and they would receive it, read it, and respond to it with their own, you know, everything about them. And I think it's almost like that's kind of like that relationship with Jesus. Well, yeah, you may not see him, but it's a kind of thing where you can tell him everything. And the more you tell him everything about you, it's almost the more you discover about yourself. I don't know if that.
Yeah, I really relate to your example there of your pen pal, because I see Jesus as my pen pal. You know, I have my journal and I write to Jesus. And in my time, when I sit with Jesus, you know, and read his word, then that's his love letters back to me. And we're in dialogue, you know. Something at my college that we do every Tuesday night in our worship program is Eyes on Jesus. And how did you see Jesus this week? How was he relevant? How was he real? And we have students who actually talk about glimpses of kindness and goodness, which they then relate back to seeing Jesus. You know, they relate that to a tangible aspect of Jesus in which, that they saw in somebody. Is he relatable today? My answer to that would be absolutely.
I think when you look at the stories of Jesus and how he engaged with people and the conversations he had in the Bible, the problems that they took to Jesus and the conversations he had are the same today as they were 2,000 years ago. Context may be different, but still the same thing: loneliness, doubt, fear, death, illness, suffering, the same questions. He was able to address them face to face. It's different for us. We've touched on trying to compare it to a pen pal or a journal that we write. For some, it's different. I don't write a journal. That's not my thing. My wife does that. She writes journals and diaries, but my personality is kind of different, and I tend to have my moments in different ways, but still what I'm communicating, what you're communicating, and what the people did 2,000 years ago, ultimately I think it's the same human predicament we're all in, which is we are seeking something, looking for something, trying to find an answer to something. And maybe that, you know, Jesus is the person who we can find those answers from. That's from my experience.
It's funny that you picked up on that back then Jesus spoke to those situations, but he also experienced them himself. And that gives me a tremendous amount of peace when I think that this incredible man actually experienced suffering. He actually experienced joy. He experienced pain. And it validates those experiences and feelings that I have. But yet still he was great.
And I think that's something to consider. Andrew, I know that this is something that you've spent some time investigating and really, you know, processing and putting some thoughts together. If you could share those with us, please.
Yeah, sure. And the question, who is Jesus? I think the way we ask that question is really important, first of all. If we ask, who is Jesus or who was Jesus? We're looking at two kind of different things there. Are we talking about a Jesus from the past, somebody who does not exist today? Or are we talking about somebody who did exist in the past, the present, and the continuous? So I think that's kind of important when we're asking the question, who is Jesus? I read that there's a dictionary they produced in Russia during the communist era, and in the dictionary, the definition for Jesus, it says here, was that Jesus was a mythical figure who never existed. But today there's a wealth of evidence, I think, that leads and suggests that actually a man called Jesus did exist. At a certain time, about 2,000 years ago, in a certain part of the world, and did actually walk on this earth. Not too many people today actually doubt there was a historical person called Jesus who existed. I was listening to a gentleman called Martin Scorsese. Many people may have heard of him. He's a film director, and he directed the film The Last Temptation of Christ. I don't know if any of you have seen that. And when he was asked about the purpose of his movie, he said, I wanted to show people that Jesus was fully human in the movie. But I don't think that's the problem today that many of us face. Most people know that Jesus was human. I don't think that is the question. I think what the question is unanswered is Jesus more than just human? Was he anything more than human? Because the Bible says, we read through the Bible stories or the historical figures, Jesus had characteristics of being human. He was tired, he was hungry, he suffered pain, etc. So my question isn't so much, is Jesus fully human, but is he more than human? And that becomes then important in how we answer the question, who was Jesus? There's a comedian in Britain, most of us have heard of him. John, I'm not sure if you had. He's called Billy Connolly. He's a famous comedian, love him or not. He's an interesting chap. And he said this, he says, I cannot believe in Christianity, but I think Jesus was a wonderful teacher. And I'm not really sure that can work. And I'll explain during these next few minutes. Because I don't think we have to look at what I think Jesus is or who you think Jesus is. I think that's important. But I think we need to answer this question, look at who Jesus said he was, rather than who I think he was. And if you look through the story of the Bible and you look at what this comedian is saying, I think he was a good moral man. I think there's a conflict here, because Jesus claimed to be so much more than just a good moral man. Jesus claimed some incredible, complex, some massive, huge claims. And I would go so far as to say, if we had to look at them, we'd only really be left with one choice with Jesus. Two choices. And I'll bring those two choices up. Jesus centers everything in what he says around himself, which is really interesting, this idea of relationship. Everything Jesus talks about is centered around himself. And there was a man in the Bible called John, who written part of the Bible, and he said this, he said, if you want to find God, or you want to experience God, or you want to know God, then you've got to go to Jesus. That's what he recorded Jesus as saying. So Jesus said, if you want to know God, experience God, or know who God is, you've got to come to me to experience that. So it's, as I said, a better relationship with God. A lot of psychologists in the 20th century talk about this concept of something within the human being being missing. Freud says that it's a hunger for love. He says, which is missing in the human. Jung said people are searching for security, and Alder said people are hungry for significance. And Jesus, he said, I'm the bread of life. In other words, to me, what Jesus was claiming was, if you want your hunger satisfied, if whatever you're searching for deep down inside needs to be satisfied, as the gentleman in the video said, then you've got to come to me. I'm the only one who can satisfy that void which is in your life. And certainly for me, in my experience, it was kind of like that when I became a Christian. Jesus talks about as well, I am light, which is a huge claim. I mean, if you really think about that, I am light. In other words, I am existence, I am everything. But it was when I accepted Jesus and accepted what he said he was, being this bread of life and being light, it was like being in a dark room, which suddenly the light was switched on, and that resonated with me. You know, I'm quite an impressionable person, especially when I was younger as well. And like you, John, I always saw somebody like my father or other people and wanted to be like them. It wasn't always for the good. And Jesus says as well about this idea of relationship. If you want to know God, you've got to follow me. You've got to be like me. So it's all about relationship. It's really hard because sometimes what does he look like? Who are we following? And takes me back to a story I heard of a child who was drawing a picture, and the mother said, who are you drawing? What are you drawing? And the little child says, I'm drawing a picture of God. And the mother said, you can't do that because nobody knows what God looks like. So how can you draw a picture? And the kid responded, well, when they look at my picture, they'll know what he looks like. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what Jesus, another one of his claims is when Jesus said, if you want to know what God looks like, then look at me. And that's a bold claim. Is that the claim of a moral man? A good moral man saying that if you want to know what God looks like, look at me because I'm God. If you want to know God, you've got to come through me. These are big, huge claims. And one of the most outrageous claims I think that Jesus ever made, which is astonishing, is that he said, I will forgive you. Something we've talked about before, this idea of forgiveness. Now, we've talked before, I can forgive you, but I certainly can't forgive you for hurting Sophia. But this is what Jesus claimed. He said, I will forgive you for hurting her. And ultimately, that's what cost Jesus his life. The Bible calls this blasphemy, which is someone claiming to be God, someone claiming to be able to forgive sins. Only God can do that. And that's what Jesus claimed he was able to do. I'm able to forgive people of sins. That was an outrageous claim. C.S. Lewis, the famous British writer, said about it, he said, for Jesus to claim that he can forgive sin is only acceptable if he is the one offended by it. And it only makes sense if Jesus was really God, whose laws were broken. If this claim is made by anything else or anybody else, it would imply that this person is conceited and mentally disturbed more than any other person in history. That's then, what do you do then? Because Jesus claimed he would forgive. Is that a good moral person. There's a conflict there from what our friend Billy Colony said. So ultimately, Jesus was asked directly who he was. He claimed in a roundabout way who he was, as I've just pointed out. But at one point, or several points, he was actually directly asked who he was. Reveal your identity to us. And somebody asked him, are you the Christ? Christ meaning this person they were expecting, a God himself. Are you the Christ, they said. Are you the Son of God? And Jesus said, I am. So there's no doubt he knew his identity. There's no doubt he knew who he was. And he even then said, and one day you will see me next to God in heaven. That's a huge claim. A huge claim. And I think some people grasped it when he was on earth. One of his followers said to him, he fell at his feet, and he said, my Lord, my God. That's a huge claim for somebody to make to a human being. So Jesus' claims are huge, and he tells the people he physically met 2,000 years ago, you know, you have reward, you're blessed, the Bible said, because you've seen me and you've believed. But then maybe talking to us today, but blessed or great are the ones in the future who believe me but haven't seen me, because it is harder, as we've discussed. So to kind of conclude this section here, Jesus basically claimed to be God, an outrageous claim. And if he knew he wasn't God, if he knew he was not God, then he would be deluded, mentally ill, or C.S. Lewis said even deceited and evil. Or Jesus knew he was God, and in that case, what do we then do? And I think that's what we have to do with Jesus. We can't just call him a good moral teacher because he claimed so much more than that. He actually claimed he was God here on earth. That's a big thing that we have to then deal with when we're asking that question.
Andrew, thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. I think you've really given us a lot to take in and consider there. And I just like to start off by asking the question that, do individuals sometimes avoid considering the relevance of Jesus and who he says he is because it will conflict with the social opinions and ideals that are in the world today? Svea, what do you think?
I think people do. And I think people also may consider Jesus, but not necessarily want to know him after considering him. And then you have the other side of people who do consider and want to get to know him even more. The thing about Christianity is that we're given a choice, and it's either you come and know me or you don't. And that's the beauty of Christianity and God, really.
In terms of conflict with social ideas and things in our current society, Jesus goes almost against almost all these ideas of doing things for yourself or getting what you can get while you can. He taught so many messages about love and peace and grace. And I mean, in a time where the world is overrun with wars and social injustice and stuff, it's like, how do you match that up with somebody that lived the complete opposite? It wasn't just that he taught it. It wasn't that he just said these things about this kind of stuff. It was he lived it and he showed it to everyone around him. So in a world where if you don't get what you need to get for yourself, you're overrun and taken advantage of, how do you love your enemy?
Yeah, and I was thinking, this is the problem with Jesus, a lot of what he says is counterintuitive and countercultural. When you read a lot of what he says, you get life by giving it away. That makes no sense in a natural kind of a world. But the more you give away, the more you actually get, he says. The more you make yourself small, the bigger you are. It just does not make sense at all. And it doesn't appeal in one way if you're just thinking the natural way in which the world functions. So I think the person of Jesus is a challenge, just like you said, Andrew. He makes such huge claims. He's kind of uncomfortable. You know, we like to think of him as a great friend, etc., etc. But the claims he makes, you know, it's like these movies that you watch sometimes where somebody wants to take over the world, or you think they're all crazy. It's the same kind of thing, in a sense, with Jesus, that he's doing that kind of thing with people too.
I think as well with people, when you're not left with much of a choice when you accept Jesus. I know our Prime Minister in England has said that he considers himself a Christian, but it doesn't play an important part in his life. I can't accept that from any point of view, as a believer in Christianity or as not, because to take the claims of Christianity, which are basically the claims of a man, Jesus, they're huge claims, and it has to have more than just insignificant part of your life. And I think why so many people maybe don't choose Jesus is because there then comes responsibility. You accept Jesus, there is responsibility. And for so many people, and I included at a period in my life, it's easier to put God in the cupboard or under the ground or get rid of him completely, so then you don't have to deal with it. Because once you start engaging in a relationship with anybody, friends, family, neighbours, you can't just put relationships down. They require work and effort. So for some people, I think maybe it's the responsibility of accepting Jesus is quite huge.
I guess though, what we're taught is that relationships should be easy and they should be comfortable. And, you know, some of the things that have been said make it sound like, you know, this relationship with Jesus, in order for him to have relevance, sounds quite uncomfortable and quite difficult. And that counteracts, you know, what we're taught, and it goes against natural instinct. You know, how do we deal with this?
Well, you know, there is a saying, anything worth having is worth fighting for. The more effort you can put into something, the more you will value it. So I think it's the same with Jesus as well. He comes at you and he's a bit abrasive and he makes some claims, etc. Okay, if you work at it, then you realize the gem that is there in getting to know who he is as a person. In a sense, it's easy, and yet you need to work at it in order to make a relationship with Jesus really meaningful, I think.
I guess it's like any other relationship as well. Relationships do take work. You're going to have the highs of a relationship, you're going to have the lows in a relationship, and you're going to have the in-betweens. And you have all of that in your relationship with Jesus. But also what you have in a relationship with Jesus, like you would have in a marriage relationship, is you start to change and you develop into a different person, particularly with Jesus. That's where the conflicts come in. The you be small and I will make you big. You know, those conflicts that don't quite make sense when you're actually in that relationship with Jesus, and then you reflect back on those highs and those lows, you actually realise that that's what's taking place, being changed.
So, Andrew, if you had to summarise this concept of Jesus, what would you say?
To summarise the concept of Jesus, you have to either accept him for what he claimed to be and then begin a relationship with him and allow his presence in your life, allow that relationship to flourish, to grow. And ultimately, as Sophia said, like a marriage, you will change. Or we just dismiss him, maybe.
Thank you. We're now going to enjoy some special music once more from Kirsty Esselval Smars.
Abide
The discussion this evening has been quite deep and it's been pretty heavy going, but I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to come and speak with us this evening. I think it's been really interesting. And thank you to you at home for joining us. I hope you found it thought-provoking and that it's really sort of stirred some thoughts and feelings inside that maybe you want to discover more about. But take care, and we hope to see you soon on Connect to Escape.